Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
But I had a sudden presentiment that I was going to have a puncture, so I went back to pick up my pump. And then, of course, I didn't have a puncture at all.
From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
When people ask me, what must I see on Broadway this season, I say you must not miss Angela Lansbury in Blithe Spirit. And I'm so happy that she's with us tonight. Welcome, Angela Lansbury, to Theatre Talk.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Now, it's true, everybody is talking about this performance as Madame Arcati in Blithe Spirit, particularly this extraordinary dance that you do. Now, you're playing a medium in this famous Noel Coward play, and you contact the spiritual world. And as you get yourself sort of revved up to talk to the other side, you put on, I believe it's an Irving Berlin song, Always.
Always, that's right.
And then you launch into this extraordinary bit of choreography. Is that yours?
Yes, it is. I was given leave to do this by the director,
Michael Blakemore.
Blakemore, but also by Noel Coward.
Really?
In his stage direction. It says in the very fine print, italics, she begins to do an aborted dance, a little aborted dance. Now, those simple words clicked in my naughty brain, and I thought, here's a chance to show how she attracted the spirits. What she wanted to do was to create a mood in which the spirits would come, and that she would be able to achieve what she set out to do, which was to bring about the appearance of a ghost. Well, she wasn't always successful, and she was very unsuccessful, in fact, but nevertheless, this was her style of doing having a séance. It's nobody else's, but it's my version of Madame Arcati.
We should say, for those who don't know the play, you're the town's renowned eccentric and medium.
Well, I am, yes. I come from London. I'm a new resident in the area, and they invite me because Mr. Condamine, who is the host for the evening, has met me on another occasion at some kind of a spiritual gathering, and also she's a writer. She writes children's books.
Yes.
So she has an extremely interesting and creative and rather whimsical mind, to say the least.
Well, that whimsical is a great description of this dance. Now, do you change this choreography every night, or is this like, Bob Fosse or Michael Bennett choreography? You've set it in stone and it's been written down for future productions?
No, it's different every night. It depends on what I've had for dinner, what my bones are feeling like, and my muscles. And no, I like to feel that I can change it. Because there is no choreographer, it's up to me, and I created it in the first place.
Well, the one I saw, you were almost doing a Cheetah Rivera leg lift. The leg went very high the night I saw the show.
You said that, and I don't even remember it, but I probably couldn't walk the next day.
I don't believe it. Did you, in your travels through show business, did you ever meet Noel Coward?
I did meet him very briefly, sadly. But back in the 70s, I would have said. I met him at the Plaza Hotel at a wonderful reception in which he and Marlene Dietrich were being feted. But other than that, I never had the chance.
Any impression he made on you, or any
Not
memories?
Not really. No, I know that he came to see me in various shows. And I wrote in his diary that he had seen me in, for instance, in Dear World, and had loved the performance. And of course, Dear World was really kind of akin to Arcati in a way, because she was an eccentric.
Yeah, that's right.
And also embodied a lot of the movements which Donald Sadler gave me for Dear World, which I have remained in my sort of, my muscular makeup there. Those movements were always there. So I used them for Arcati.
Interesting.
Actors always do that, we always retain all these things somewhere in us.
The first Madame Arcati, I believe, was Margaret Rutherford, the great British actress.
Yes.
Did you see her movie version?
No, I did not. And I saw a picture of her, I have it in my dressing room, in which she's wearing a shirtwaist and a long skirt. Now, I had a whole different take on Arcati, which was that she had probably been a very brilliant student. She'd probably gone to a women's college in England called Girton, in which a lot of the sort of gym teachers and teachers, period, they were all trained at Girton. And that's why she has this very kind of militant way of talking, and everything's for the team and all this. And and she came out of it with that. But she also had this artistic side to her, which allowed her to become this writer of children's books, which are and romances. She wrote kind of romance stories, you see, which they got. I mean, no actress has a better entrance.
Madam Arcati!
That which is given by the other characters who talk about it for 10 minutes.
You're built up before That must be a little daunting, though. I mean, you got to live up to the hype. You have a really terrific director, Michael Blakemore, who's been a guest on this show a number of times. He's a very, very analytical, very intellectual man. What is it that he told you in the cast some fundamental things to understand about this play? Because we think of Blithe Spirit as a comedy, a light comedy, and yet when I was watching it the other day, there's a seriousness under it. And I just wondered what Michael told you about this play, how to look at this play.
Well, I think he kind of said this. He said, this is really a comedy of manners. He said, you were asked as performers to behave in a way that was normal and natural in the 1940s, in that certain class-ridden society which was Britain in that era. You had the lower classes, lower being the servant class, you had the middle class, you had the upper middle class, and you had the highbrows, you know, the people who had titles and that sort of thing. So he said this concerns a upper middle class family who live in this village, and you behave in such a way that is commensurate with that class level that you live on. And your attitudes are totally different from anything that we have today. All of that has gone from England, but at that time, Britain, you know, this is the way they talked to their servants and etc. And the servant class didn't expect to ever rise above it, because that was what they were born into, and they remained, except in very singular circumstances.
Do you remember that as a child?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, except I came from a socialist family,
Yeah.
labor rights, who didn't believe in any of that.
Yes.
So the people who worked for us were we treated them like real people.
Right.
And of course, we know Noel Coward himself came from rather modest circumstances as well. Even though he styled himself as a great man of the drawing rooms of the world, in fact, he was fundamentally an outsider.
He succeeded. He absolutely did. And Michael talked about this. And he said, so he's writing about something that he really understood very, very well. Coward understood, because he didn't come from that group, but he admired them tremendously, and he wished to be like them, and did become like them, although he never lost sight of his beginnings.
How did you end up in America being an actress as such a young woman? Why did you come to America?
Well, because I was fortunate enough to be among a very small group of youngsters, really, who were transported to America from England to escape from the London bombings. And my mother had the opportunity of bringing us and shepherding us and a few other children to the States, through this organization which arranged it. It was rather almost like part of Bundles from Britain, And of course, Mr. Roosevelt at that time was doing everything in his power to help Britain without actually letting Congress know what he was up to, as we know, which is very interesting, really.
So did you go on, and your mother was an actress, wasn't she?
My mother was an actress and recognized that I had an innate talent. She knew from a very early age
that you had it.
Both me and my sister, we both did.
But was there any part of putting you on the stage have to do with that you had to make some money when you got here?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
But that was not the prime thing. She was perfectly prepared to do that part of it. She wanted me to get the training and to have the opportunity to learn as much as of the nuts and bolts of being a performer before. She knew I could do it. She just wanted me to have the voice. She wanted me to, you know, have every opportunity to finally make it.
So she didn't listen to Noel Coward, who said, "Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington."
Exactly. That was one of the songs I used to sing. I had a sort of an act that I did, which was one of the first professional things I ever did, was to appear in a cabaret in Montreal. And I did a whole act, and in it was, "Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington." I used to sing that.
That's horrible.
Yeah. So and other things from Red Peppers, you know, because there were a lot of Noel Coward never stopped writing wonderful material.
Yeah, amazing
for
songs.
actors. Really.
Did your mother have a slight Mama Rose quality to her?
None at all.
Not at all?
None whatsoever.
If you had said to her, "I don't want to do this," she would have...
Oh, she would have backed right off. But she had nothing to do. The only thing she did for me, you know, a real hands-on thing, was she helped me to learn and to deliver the scene from Romeo and Juliet, the balcony scene with Romeo. Romeo.
She helped you deliver it? She directed you?
No. Well, she helped me. We went through it. I learned it, and then I would perform it with her. And then, of course, I had to go off and do an audition to get the scholarship to go to the drama school in London. That was the first thing. And I was only 14 at the time. I was actually only 13, and but I was a very, as they say, mature 13, and. Up here I was mature because my mother had always sort of treated me as you know, on her own level, which was wonderful.
And your father had died.
My father had died, yes.
So
And I had to move in and sort of be her.
An adult.
Very young. Yeah.
How soon after coming to America did you find yourself at MGM?
Oh, well, I arrived in 1940, and by 43 I was at MGM.
Didn't they kind of like look at you and say, "Oh, well, you have to change your look," or sort of pick at you?
Well, they did. But they couldn't pick at me too much in the first place because, you know, I hate to say this, but if you come out with 2 Academy Award nominations in the first 3 years, they're not about. They were a little bit hands off with me.
Good, yeah.
Because they really didn't know what they had, and I was kind of an unknown quantity. And I know I was also apparently what they called today a character actress.
Yeah.
And they really didn't have a place for that. They had that wonderful actress. Oh God, names absolutely define me. Yes, Agnes Moorehead. Agnes Moorehead, and a couple of other women who were very strong in the character department, but they were playing kind of dowdy, you know.
Older ones.
Well, I ended up playing dowdy too.
Weren't you playing above your age a lot as well?
Always, yes. Always.
And that was because they said character actress type, and that's what you do.
But I was very useful, so they used to shove me into things.
You clearly, even as, what were you, 18, or just so you had substance. Do you think that's because you'd have gone through all this
of course,
travail in life to get there?
Yes and no. I think, I don't know. I can't allow, really, for how I managed to pull those things off. I really don't. I just would fill the slot as best I could, you know, and it was always an acting exercise, always an acting exercise. But in those days, I have to tell you, the scripts were very well read. Written. They really were well written. You had wonderful screenwriters.
You had said to us before we started taping, sort of interesting the way Hollywood worked back then, that you were an employee of the studio, right? I mean, nowadays you think an actor achieves some level of fame and power and they get to dictate the terms in this. But you were pretty much told, this is the job, this is what you're going to do.
Oh, absolutely. You were under contract, they paid you every week, and they expected you to take any role that was proposed, you know. And you could fight it, and I did on a number of occasions. I went to L.B. Mayer, and I said, "Mr. Mayer, why won't you let me play the role of, you know, Madame de Winter, Lady de Winter, I guess she was, in The Three Musketeers, you know, instead of playing the Queen of France?" And he said, "Angie," he said, "I want Lana to play De Winter. You're going to be a great queen." You know? Yeah. So there I was.
Was it a nerve-wracking experience to request an audience with the head of MGM?
You bet it was.
Really?
It really was. In those days, it was. You had to make that appointment a week ahead. You had to get through his 3 secretaries. He had one real lioness of a woman who was his secretary, and I can't think of her name now, but she was famous, and she vetted anybody who came in. He had an office in which you had to walk down. It's rather like visiting the Queen or somebody, because he had a white desk at the end of a long corridor, which was the office, you understand, and you had to walk down that and right up to the desk.
You had to walk up to that big desk, and
yes. Yes,
did he have the cigars? We imagine him sitting there? And...
Well, I don't know that I never saw him with a cigar, oddly enough. But in the end, we became friends.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. I used to go to dinner at his house. We used to play gin rummy. And he was a very approachable person, really. But when it came to business and playing parts, he didn't mess around.
You were the Queen of France, and that was it.
I was the Queen of France.
I'm fast-forwarding your career to your remarkable performance in Manchurian Candidate, where you were the most evil, demented woman I think that's ever been in movies. Was that just a script that came to you that you?
No, that came about because I had previously been in a wonderful movie. I think it was a wonderful movie with Warren Beatty and Eva Marie Saint and Carl Malden, called All Fall Down, which was directed by John Frankenheimer.
Right.
Yeah.
So working with Frankenheimer for the first time as playing the mother again, and again that, he and I, after a very rocky beginning, we didn't get along. We got along, but I just didn't come up to his level of what he was looking for in the role, and I finally did. So it was difficult for me because I was playing a lot older again than my years. So, but after we finished, we were, he came to me and he put the book of The Manchurian Candidate by Richard Condon on the table and said, "Angie, this is your next role, the mother." And I said, "Ooh, what's this?" And so I went home and read it pronto, and it was a huge book, but I understood what he meant, and it was such an extraordinary.
And there you were, the Queen of Spades,
Queen of Hearts, Queen of Diamonds.
Queen of Diamonds. That's right.
Diamonds.
In that famous
Not
scene
the
where
hearts,
you're
diamonds.
Yeah, where you're dressed. Did you see the remake of Manchurian Candidate?
Yes.
And.
No. I thought everybody acted their heads off, and it was great. But how can you make a movie?
Yeah.
How can you tell a story when you already know the secret? You know the story. You know what she's up
why
to.
bother, right?
No,
to make that again.
why bother?
And now we have the Tony Awards coming up, and your great friend Jerry Herman is being given the Lifetime,
Yes, isn't it lovely?
the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
Jerry has been on the show a number of times, and he has told us the story, and I'm curious from your perspective, that you were not necessarily the first choice to play Mame. And if I remember correctly, Jerry told me that he secretly rehearsed the songs with you before the audition.
Yes.
Really?
He did, yes.
And how did you meet him? How did that come
Well,
about?
it came about through the producers, Jimmy Carr and Bobby
Fryer?
Yeah. That's right. They were kind of in favor, but they had another set of producers, and they were the ones who they were having trouble persuading that I could bring this off, that I could bring in an audience, and that I could carry a show.
Yeah.
And rightly so. I don't blame them. And I say that I knew I could, but what I'm saying is I understood their point of view, but.
Because you were not an established musical theater Broadway star at this point.
Not at all. The only big musical, the big flop musical, which was Stephen's wonderful first outing with music and lyrics, which was Anyone Can Whistle.
Right.
But that at least introduced the idea that I could sing, and I sang in tune, and that I knew how to get around the stage. That's about all. As far as being a starter, no, I hadn't shown that, but it certainly showed a glimmer of the beginnings of something possibly there. So Jerry had seen that, show, and it was on the basis of his seeing that he decided I was going to be his Mame, and he never gave up.
What was the song he taught you?
He taught me It's Today.
And then didn't he sneak in your audition? Didn't he sneak into the pit and push the piano player aside and play for you?
Yes, he did. He just went under the thing and didn't let on that he was doing it. It was to give me moral support, was what it was.
Yeah.
And I had to audition for that role. I didn't just get it. And they kept changing directors. you know. And the final director, of course, was Gene Sachs.
Who was married to your friend Bea Arthur, who just
Bea
died,
Arthur's,
sadly.
yes.
Yeah.
It was Bea Arthur's husband at the time, and thanks to him, who was an unusually kind of off-center director, that he could see and understand me playing Mame.
I just can't imagine anyone else playing Mame. You know, I didn't see the production, but the cast album is so vivid. You know, when you hear it, you can't imagine anyone else playing it. And of course, Lucille Ball did to her detriment in the movies.
Oh, tragedy.
I know you were great friends with Bea Arthur, and you kindly spoke to me about her for a piece I did. That friendship came about because of Mame, right?
In the first place, yes. But I think it's interesting that it became had far more depth, shall we say, in later years. After she had done Maud, and also while she was doing Golden Girls, I was doing Murder, She Wrote. We realized we were living very close together. And it was then that the real friendship cemented. I mean, we really were in and out of each other's houses. We were constantly trading off ideas, recipes. You know, we'd go to the movies together. We became very close. And I valued that friendship more than I can tell you, because I really hadn't understood who this woman was when we were doing Mame. Because when you're doing a big show like that, and I was the #1 star in it, she had wanted to play Mame.
Really? She
Yes.
did?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Huh.
And naturally, I don't blame her, you know. I mean, actually, when you think about it, her looks and her attitudes and so on really would have lent themselves in a very interesting way to Mame.
Yes, but then who could have been Vera Charles?
Well, indeed, I couldn't have been
That's
Vera
right.
Charles.
I mean, it would be
No.
skewed off. Right.
But it was in California where you
was
became...
really-
And you
that
said
was
something very interesting, I thought, about her, that the image that we had of her publicly as being, you know, this tough broad with a withering look and a sarcastic, cutting remark, that was not really Bea Arthur.
No, it wasn't. I'm not saying that she didn't have a very hard edge when she needed to. Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Bless her. And, you know, I knew that. And I, you know, she'd make me, I'd be on the floor with laughter sometimes, I think. But nobody could tell a funny story like Bea.
But there was a softness to her underneath it
Oh,
all.
bless her. Oh, very much so. Oh, God, yes. She was the most softest person in the world, underneath all those layers of toughness, you know.
We have to, I'm afraid we're out of time. I just want to ask you one final question. You are an actress of a certain age now, and I'm curious to know, when you've come back to Broadway after, well, you did Deuce a couple of years ago, and now Madame Arcati, you were away from the stage for a fair amount of time. At your age, what is the thing you are most confident in doing on stage? What is the easiest thing to do, and what is the biggest challenge?
What is the easiest thing? Well, for me, acting is easy. Playing comedy is not easy. It's difficult. But because I enjoy doing it, it's wonderfully, you know, the feedback is tremendous. So.
And your instincts for, you know how to get a laugh, you know movement of the hand, of the eye, you just know your techniques to get the audience.
Yes, you get to exercise your technique as an actor, as a comedian. And we haven't talked about that, but I really am actually a comedian. And comedians are often very good at playing tragedy, all kinds of things. So, in other words, this link between comedy and tragedy is right there. And it really works, and both work. I enjoy doing both, but I love doing comedy. And so coming back at my age to play comedy is probably the most comfortable thing I can do.
And what's the difficult thing, though, if you've been away from the stage for so long?
Just keeping up the physical energy which is required to send it across the footlights. I mean, this is what I work towards, and I take excruciating care of my body and what I eat and how I conduct and, you know, live my life while I'm on stage. You know, I really do, and that's the thing I depend on to hold me up there and give me that thrust which gets it across the footlights. Because when you are of a certain age, you know, you don't have that extraordinary kind of ebullience that you do in youth. And you have to pretend that you do.
Don't miss Angela Lansbury as Madame Arcati doing unforgettable dance, an interpretive spiritual dance in Blithe Spirit at the Schubert Theater. Angela Lansbury, thanks a lot for being our guest.
It's been such fun. Thank you for having me.
If I say that your tongue is vicious, if I call you uncouth, it's simply that who else but our bosom buddy will sit down and tell you the truth.
When did you discover these extraordinary powers that you had them?
Well, when I was quite tiny. You see, my mother was a medium before me, so I had the opportunity of starting on the ground floor.